Chapter 1. City Lights, Hollow Nights. The city was a symphony of steel and glass, a cacophony of ambition echoing off the towering skyscrapers. Richard Wilder, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, stood in his corner office, a monument to his success. He gazed out the window at the sprawling metropolis below, a concrete jungle he had helped to shape. His name, Richard, was synonymous with innovation, his designs pushing the boundaries of commercial architecture. He was known for his bold vision, his ability to defy gravity, and his relentless pursuit of redefining the city's skyline. Some might say, with a touch of irony, that Richard, a brave ruler, was a fitting moniker for a man who commanded such influence over the city's landscape. He was a master of his domain, his creations not just buildings, but statements of power and prestige. Banks, corporate headquarters, luxury hotels. His portfolio was a testament to his talent and his relentless drive. He had achieved everything he had ever wanted, yet a nagging emptiness lingered in his heart. A dissonance between the glittering facade he projected and the quiet yearning within. He watched a lone sailboat, a tiny speck of white against the vast gray expanse of the harbor, its single mast pointing defiantly towards the open sea. The image triggered a flicker of memory, a long-forgotten scene from his childhood. He remembered brief, awkward visits to the coast, the smell of salt and fish clinging to his grandfather's weathered clothes. Rangi Wilder, a man of the sea whose life seemed as alien to Richard as a forgotten language. Rangi's world was one of wind and waves, of navigating by the stars and living in harmony with nature. Richard had dismissed it all as quaint and outdated, a relic of a bygone era. He hadn't understood the quiet strength in Rangi's eyes, the deep connection he had with something larger than himself. He hadn't understood, until much later, the quiet wisdom in his grandfather's words when he'd say, "The horizon is not in the skyline, Richard. It's much, much bigger than that." The phone buzzed, interrupting his reverie. It was his assistant, reminding him of the upcoming meeting with a potential client, a billionaire developer considering him for a prestigious skyscraper design competition. "Mr. Sterling is very interested in your preliminary designs, sir," his assistant said. Her voice, crisp and professional, sounded detached as she added this could be a major win for the firm. Richard sighed, a flicker of weariness in his eyes. He knew the drill. The endless presentations, the power lunches, the subtle negotiations, the carefully crafted image he had to project. It was a game he played well, but it had lost its allure. He thought of his father, ever the pragmatist. "You're going to be a brave ruler, Rich," he'd say, a subtle pressure in his voice. "Make us proud." He pushed the memory of his grandfather aside, focusing on the upcoming meeting. This competition, this chance to design a truly iconic structure, could solidify his place among the city's architectural elite. He was driven by ambition. He'd poured months of work into his innovative, gravity-defying structure, a testament to his skill and vision. He was so focused on winning, on the prestige and recognition it would bring, that he overlooked a crucial detail: the impact his building would have on the surrounding neighborhood. Local businesses would be displaced, affordable housing demolished. When a community activist had contacted his office with these concerns, Richard had instructed his assistant to politely but firmly decline a meeting. The greater good of his architectural vision, he reasoned, outweighed these minor inconveniences. The meeting with Mr. Sterling went smoothly. The billionaire developer, a man whose sharp eyes missed nothing, leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Mr. Wilder," he began, "your designs are impressive, innovative. But I'm curious." He paused, tapping a manicured finger on the table. This proposed location. It's a vibrant neighborhood. What happens to the people, the businesses, currently occupying that space? Richard, momentarily caught off guard, recovered quickly. Progress, Mr. Sterling, inevitably involves some restructuring. But the benefits of this project, the economic growth, the jobs created, will far outweigh any temporary displacement. Sterling's expression remained unreadable. I see, he said slowly. And the architectural integrity, the artistic vision, does that outweigh the human cost? Richard felt a flicker of irritation. The design, Mr. Sterling, is a masterpiece. It will redefine the city's skyline, become an icon. Surely, that's worth some. He searched for the right word. Adjustments. Sterling nodded, a subtle glint in his eye. Indeed, Mr. Wilder, indeed. The meeting concluded with a handshake, a promise of a decision soon. Richard left Sterling's office, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. He had said all the right things, projected the image of confidence and ambition, yet Sterling's questions lingered, echoing the doubts that whispered in his own soul. The gallery hummed with the voices of the city's elite, a carefully curated blend of art connoisseurs, socialites, and investors. Richard, a glass of champagne in hand, surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. He recognized a few familiar faces: a renowned art critic, a prominent real estate developer, a social media influencer whose every move seemed to generate headlines. He exchanged air kisses and polite greetings, his smile a carefully constructed mask. "Richard, darling," a voice chirped. It was Emily, a woman he had dated briefly, a socialite known for her impeccable fashion sense and her even more impeccable connections. "I adore your suit," she gushed, her eyes flitting over his tailored attire. "Is it Armani?" "As a matter of fact, it is," Richard replied, a touch of pride in his voice. "Custom made." "Of course it is," Emily giggled. "You always have the best taste." We engaged in a conversation about the artwork, a series of abstract paintings that Richard found vaguely interesting but couldn't quite decipher. He nodded and smiled, offering the occasional insightful comment gleaned from overheard conversations. Emily, more interested in the social dynamics than the art itself, pointed out a prominent art collector across the room. "He's rumored to be buying up everything in sight," she whispered. "Perhaps you should try to get in on the action." Richard chuckled. "Perhaps I will." He excused himself, moving through the crowd, his eyes scanning for potential investors, influential contacts, anyone who could further his career. He spotted a young woman standing alone, her gaze fixed on a particularly striking painting. She seemed out of place, her simple dress and unassuming demeanor a stark contrast to the polished sophistication of the other guests. Intrigued, Richard approached her. "Excuse me," he began. "I couldn't help but notice your interest in this piece. Do you have a particular affinity for abstract art?" The woman turned, her eyes widening slightly. "Oh," she stammered. "I'm not sure I understand it completely, but it evokes something in me, a sense of longing, perhaps." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Longing?" he echoed. "For what?" The woman hesitated, then said softly, "For something beyond the city, beyond the concrete and steel. For something more natural, I suppose." Richard felt a flicker of recognition, a faint echo of the yearning he had buried deep within himself. He opened his mouth to respond, but the woman excused herself, melting back into the crowd. He watched her go, a strange sense of curiosity mingled with a touch of regret. He had a fleeting opportunity for a genuine connection, a conversation that hinted at something deeper, but he had let it slip away. He purchased an expensive painting, a swirling mass of colors that he knew would impress his colleagues and clients, and left the gallery, the voices and laughter fading behind him. He felt a familiar emptiness, a sense of isolation amidst the crowd. His relationships, like the art he had just acquired, were more about image and status than genuine connection. The following morning, Richard received a call from Mr. Sterling. "Mr. Wilder," the billionaire's voice boomed through the phone. "I'm pleased to inform you that you've won the competition. Your design is precisely what I envisioned for this project." Richard thanked him, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. He had achieved another victory, another step up the ladder of success. But the news brought no joy, only a weary sense of obligation. He thought of the displaced families, the human cost of his ambition, and the emptiness gnawed at him. Later that day, Richard met with Kieran, his young apprentice, to review the designs for a smaller project. The young architect, eager and enthusiastic, presented his designs full of idealism and innovative ideas. Richard, however, steered the conversation towards more conventional approaches, subtly reinforcing the message that success in this world required compromise and a pragmatic, sometimes ruthless, approach. He acted as a gatekeeper, unconsciously perpetuating the very system that had shaped him, a system he was beginning to despise. As he dismissed the young architect, Richard felt a wave of disgust wash over him. Disgust with the city, with the endless pursuit of wealth and status, with himself. He was tired of the game, tired of the masks, tired of the emptiness. He longed for something more, something real, something that resonated with the quiet yearning in his soul. A week later, the news came. Rangi Wilder, his grandfather, the man he barely knew, had passed away. And with that news came a package, a weathered box containing a tattered journal and a cryptic message that would change Richard's life forever.